am writing this in my study, not in the sealed records division where I spent 31 years, and not in the testimony chamber where I sat across from Ithran Vale on 3 separate mornings and took down every word she said. I am writing it here because the file will not accept another addendum. The file is closed. It has been closed since the 2nd year after the crossing, when the Vethrani Institute reviewed the deposition, the flight telemetry, and the recovery logs, and determined that the record was complete. I did not contest that determination then. I am not contesting it now. I am simply writing what the record does not hold, in a document no one has asked for, in the 31st year since I sat in that chamber and listened to the only member of the Vethrani fleet who came back. The Vethrani crossing is not obscure. Any junior researcher at the Institute can pull the summary. 47 vessels of the line, 3 support transports, 1 command tender, launched under the 2nd expansion mandate, with full parliamentary authorization, and the backing of 11 member states. The fleet was well captained. The navigational planning was thorough. The Vethrani had studied the border for 18 years before the crossing vote passed, and they had satisfied themselves, through careful instrument work at 3 buffer positions, that the designation was administrative overcaution rather than enforcement. Their analysts were not careless. Their evidence, by every standard I was trained to apply, was sufficient to support the conclusion they reached. They crossed the outer margin at the start of the 43rd standard day of the mission. I know this from the telemetry, which continued transmitting for some time after the fleet crossed. That is one of the things the summary does not explain well. The fleet did not vanish at the line. The instruments kept sending. What the telemetry shows, and I have read it many times, in the years since the file was sealed, is a sequence of internal records, not combat logs, not damage assessments, the fleet's own procedural records, the ship-wide consultations that each captain was required to conduct before any significant navigational decision under the mandate's standing orders. The mandate required consensus. Every captain had to confirm crew agreement before each threshold crossing. It was standard doctrine. The fleet crossed the outer margin. The telemetry shows the consultation records for each vessel, the crew agreements, the unanimous confirmations, the captain's authorization entries, every ship, every crew, unanimous. They crossed the first interior threshold 4 days later. The consultation records are there, unanimous again. The second interior threshold, the records are there. I have read them until I know the authorization language without looking. The crews did not waver. The logs show no dissent filed, no abstention recorded, no request to alter course submitted through any channel. 47 vessels of the line, and 3 support transports, each with a crew ranging from 60 to 212, each conducting the required consultation, each returning a unanimous result. The command tender's records stop on the 8th day inside the margin, not abruptly. The final entry is a routine navigational authorization, properly formatted, countersigned by 4 senior officers. Then nothing. Then the support transports, in sequence, over the following 36 hours. Then the vessels of the line, not all at once but in clusters, each cluster's final entry a consultation record, each consultation unanimous. The last vessel's final entry is dated 11 days and 7 hours after the fleet crossed the outer margin. I know the authorization language of that entry as well. I do not quote it here. Ithran Vale was a junior navigation technician aboard the Sundral Reach, the 3rd vessel of the line to go silent. She came back on the recovery craft that the mandate dispatched when the telemetry stopped. The recovery team found her at the outer margin, not inside, at the line itself, sitting in an emergency transit pod that had been deployed from the Sundral Reach. At some point the pod's own log recorded only as a timestamp. She was uninjured. Her vitals were within normal range. She was not, by any measurable standard that the recovery physicians applied, physically altered. I sat across from her in the sealed testimony chamber on 3 mornings over the course of 11 days. On the first morning she described the mission's preparation in careful detail. She was precise. She had a technician's habit of accounting for every variable she could name, and she named them in order and I transcribed them in order, and the transcript is accurate. She described the crossing of the outer margin. She described the first interior threshold. She said the consultations felt normal. The kind of unanimous agreement that a well-led crew produces when the planning has been thorough and the officers are trusted. She said there was nothing unusual in the mood of the ship. On the second morning she described the second interior threshold and what came after. I will set down here what she said and what I observed, because the deposition covers the first but not the second. She said that at some point, she could not locate it precisely in the sequence of days. The consultations began to feel different, not the result. The result was always the same, unanimous. What changed was the quality of the agreeing. She described it as, the moment before the vote was taken, there was a period in which everyone in the room was already certain of the outcome, and the certainty was not comfortable. It was simply very complete. She said she had been in unanimous consultations before, on earlier missions, and they had felt like agreement. These felt like inevitability. She said she did not know why she deployed the pod. She said the decision did not feel like a decision. She said she became aware that she was in the pod, and that the pod was moving, and she did not remember choosing. She said she was sorry to have survived when the rest of her crew had not, and I transcribed that too, and it is in the file. What is not in the file is what I observed across the 3 mornings. On the first morning, Ithran Vale ordered her meal from the chamber's provision terminal without hesitation. She chose quickly, confirmed the order, and ate. On the second morning, she stood at the terminal for some time before ordering. She studied the options as though the text were in a script she was reading carefully for errors. On the third morning, I ordered for her. I had done this with other deponents who were in distress. It is not unusual, and the record of the session does not note it. She ate what I ordered. She thanked me in a tone I found difficult to characterize then and still find difficult to characterize now. Not gratitude exactly. Relief, perhaps, of a very specific kind. After the final session, I walked her to the Institute's transit platform. There was a route selection panel at the platform entrance. She stood in front of it and did not move until I reached past her and pressed the designation for her lodging. She watched my hand do it. She did not comment. I filed the deposition. I closed the transcript. I submitted my clerk's notation that the record was complete. All of that is accurate. The record is complete, as far as it goes. What I could not transcribe, because it was not testimony and there was no form to hold it, was my own understanding of what had happened to her. Ithran Vale had come back from wherever the Sundral Reach had gone, and she had come back intact, and the thing that was no longer intact was not her body, or her memory, or her ability to speak. What was gone was the capacity to arrive at a conclusion in the presence of others, not alone. She managed, with effort, when no one was watching. But in any room with another person, at any moment that called for a shared decision, she simply stopped. She waited. She stood in front of the panel and she waited for a hand that was not hers. I have thought about this for 30 years. I have not discussed it with anyone at the Institute. I have not raised it in any document that carries my name. What I believe, and I write it here only because I am old and the file is sealed and no one will ask me to defend it, is that the Vethrani fleet was not destroyed. I do not think human space engaged it. I do not think there was a weapon, or a defense line, or any mechanism of the kind our threat analysts have spent decades trying to imagine. I think the fleet crossed, and the fleet voted, and the votes were unanimous, because unanimous was the only direction available in that space, and the fleet followed its own doctrine, to wherever the doctrine led, and human space provided only the room in which that happened. Ithran Vale survived because she left the room before the vote completed. She did not decide to leave. She simply found herself outside it, and the part of her that had learned, in 11 days inside that margin, what unanimous certainty feels like when the room is providing it, that part did not come back the same. I do not know what human space is. I have never claimed to know. I know only that 47 vessels of the line conducted their consultations correctly, returned unanimous results correctly, and pressed forward correctly, and that the last consultation record is formatted exactly as the mandate requires, and that there is nothing after it. The record is complete. I will not write past this line.